The state of Kansas is broke, extremely broke. Revenues were down 7.3% the first half of 2014 fiscal year. That's the second biggest. The state of Kansas is broke, extremely broke. Revenues were down 7.3% the first half of 2014 fiscal year. That's the second biggest decline in the entire United States. Job growth in Kansas lags behind the rest of the country. Moody's has downgraded the state's credit rating. And the state Supreme Court recently ruled that Kansas had been unconstitutionally underfunding its schools. So what happened to bring the land that produced Dwight Eisenhower, the paragon of balanced budgets and fiscal moderation, to these dire straits? What happened to the state of Kansas? This happened.
Specifically, what do you want to do on state income tax?
Get it to zero. The whole thing.
The whole thing. Kansas Governor Sam Brownback didn't actually make it all the way to zero, but he came pretty close. In 2012, Kansas passed a tax bill that, among other things, cut the state's highest income tax rates and completely exempted small business income. With a loss of revenue, the state general fund is now projected to be over $1 billion in the red by 2019. At some level, none of this should be surprising. Many Kansas Republicans ran on a platform of slashing tax revenue. The people elected them. They followed through and slashed tax revenue, and now the state is broke. And thanks in part to the fiscal fallout, Governor Brownback now finds himself in a bit of trouble. It's an election year, and the governor currently trails his Democratic challenger in 3 out of the 4 most recent polls. But it's not just Brownback who's dealing with the impact of those tax cuts. It's the citizens of Kansas. As we showed in our All in America series, the lack of funding has some very real consequences.
We lost the 7th and 8th grade 3 years ago, and then we lost our 4th grade last year, and budget cuts just seem to be coming down.
This budget cut's closing the schools. When a town loses its school, you lose the town. It's just kind of hard to put into words because it's just like you're losing a part of your family, like a part of your family is being torn away from you, and so it's a extreme loss. It really is.
Joining me now, Kansas State Democratic Senator Anthony Hensley. Senator, how bad is it in Kansas?
It's pretty bad, Chris. Unfortunately, in this past fiscal year, we had a $700 million revenue decline. And you can compare that with the Great Recession in 07, 08, and 09, where we had a $600 million revenue decline in 3 years.
So you had, in 1 year, the tax cuts took out more revenue from the state budget than 3 years of the worst financial crisis in 80 years.
That's exactly right. Those were the figures that we've been given at $700 million versus $600 million. And in 1 year, as I say, it's a $700 million revenue decline.
The governor was on with my colleague Chuck Todd this morning on our air here. He was defending his record. This is what he had to say.
It's really stimulated investment. It's stimulated people coming into the state. We've got a record number of new businesses. We've got a record number of people working in the state of Kansas. So it's working overall. It's just these things do take some time, and it's moving us on forward.
What's your response to that?
Well, I don't see the growth that the governor is referring to. And when he talks about a record number of businesses, in reality, it's small business who are changing their tax status so that they can get the return of paying no income taxes. I think that's the increase in the businesses that we've seen. They've just changed their filings.
So people are changing their filing because taxes on small businesses were essentially zeroed out, right, or cut dramatically. And so you're seeing people now file as small businesses if they can, so they can get the tax benefit.
That's correct, and that's why I think it's rather disingenuous to say that we've had an increase in businesses when, in fact, it's just existing businesses that have changed their tax status.
You are, if I'm not mistaken, you're actually a teacher, is that right?
That's correct.
As a teacher and someone who's in the state Senate, what does this look like on the ground level in terms of Kansas education, which has been hammered by cuts to try to balance budgets in the face of this revenue decline?
Yeah, we've already seen a cut of almost $550 per student on our base budget per pupil. And we're going to see more cuts in the future because of these income tax cuts that the governor has pushed through the legislature. And the real concern I have is the bottom line with our general fund. The projection is by 2019, we will have to cut the budget by some $1.2 billion. And in a small Midwestern state like Kansas, that's going to be devastating in terms of meeting our general fund obligations, such as K through 12 education, higher education, corrections, highways, social services, and all the rest of it that we're obligated to try to, help people.
So what's the solution? It's striking to me that your party, Democratic Party's nominee for governor running against Mr. Brownback, doesn't advocate going back to the tax rates before the tax cuts. So if you don't want to raise taxes, what's the solution here?
Well, right now, the candidate for our party is advocating that we at least freeze the income tax cuts at the 2015 level. And that would certainly improve the out years when you look at 17, 18, and 19.
Am I right quickly here that there were also tax raises on the lowest income earners in your state?
Well, the governor had to try to pay or lessen the revenue reductions as possible and pay for these tax cuts. So, yeah, what we actually did was we eliminated a program that had been on the books for years for income-eligible Kansans, typically people, disabled Kansans and elderly Kansans who receive what was called the food sales tax rebate.
Kansas State Senator Anthony Hensley, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.